Michael.
Jay
How
White.
are you?
Good.
Ace.
Ace and beauty. Ace
Yeah.
before beauty.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Bring it.
sorry we're not live this morning like we normally are,
Yeah,
but we're with you in spirit.
that's right. Well, all the while, I mean, it's always the best to have Representative Conley on here.
I agree, and she couldn't do it tomorrow.
Representative.
She has a grandbaby tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm very jealous, but she does. She does. I don't, but she does. So she couldn't be with us tomorrow live. So we're recording the evening before. So I'm going to bring Miss Sherrie on here. Good morning, afternoon.
Yeah.
Everything's all, where are we? How are you today?
I am good. I'm good. It's been a long week.
How was the session today?
It was fast paced. They had a lot on the agenda that they wanted to get accomplished, and so they went breakneck speed. And we thought we were going to get out at noon for lunch, and they ended up working through lunch. And
okay,
so yeah, it was crazy.
Dang.
Yeah.
Well, you need to tell us about something that's very exciting and near and dear to your heart, because you got a bill through.
Yes.
So tell us, please.
So it's House Bill 3958, and what it does is it prohibits school personnel from having conversations digitally or electronically individually with students one-on-one. So if let's say that they need to talk to one of their students, they cannot do it unless there's a parent on there, or if it's a group like a team, then the team can be on there. But other than that, it limits the talk time and how they can talk to students based on platform. Now, one of the things that the bill allows for is for teachers, coaches, staff members to use something that's approved by the school district. But like to just text a student on your personal cell phone, that is not allowed. So.
Well, but what if they use like Snapchat or something as a school? Can they talk privately with them through an app like that?
If it is a school approved platform, then yes. But individually, no. It says the legislation specifically says digitally or electronically with a student.
Okay.
So meaning one. So Facebook pages, that sort of thing. That's all completely legal as far as
sure.
School Facebook pages and that sort of thing. But to communicate one-on-one, and it's not just limited to texting. That includes the case out in Shawnee where the coach was talking to student over Grindr, and then also texting. That is unacceptable. So yeah, I know it's shocking.
I'm so glad I did not have dinner first.
I know.
Well, and I didn't even tell you, Sherrie. I should have. When I first heard about that bill, I should have told you about something kind of we were onto. A former employee at Edmond Public Schools had contacted me and said in one of the junior highs, there was a staff member that was Snapchatting with a whole bunch of boys constantly, very inappropriately talking, very sensitive subjects that were not, should not be discussed with these boys. And there was really no way for us to kind of do anything about that because it was all Snapchat. I contacted a couple of the parents I knew that were involved, and they said, hey, there's no trace or there's no way to prove any of this. Yeah. So I just wonder how, in a case like that, I wonder how, we can get some resolution to someone doing that.
Yeah. So that's what the bill does. And so if there's a report that has taken place, then it gets investigated. The teacher, staff member, whatever, gets put on administrative leave while the school does an investigation. If they find inappropriate conduct, then it is immediate dismissal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But
wait.
the school district would do the investigation, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I know that's a problem. But here's the thing is that one of the things that I am going to encourage the State Department of Education, because there's a clause in there for the State Department to create training for teachers. I want there to be a strong suggestion that school districts create policy to educate students on the issues, because if we tell teachers, well, you can't do this, but we don't tell students what the boundaries are, then, I think that's going to be the second piece of it. And I didn't put it in my bill to mandate that, but I think that SDE needs to have the conversation with administration, with the attorneys and that sort of thing, that it needs to be policy inside the student handbook that there is no reason why a teacher should be communicating individually, privately with a student without a parent or a guardian included in that conversation. That it's just unacceptable, and it should be in school policy. And that protects everybody. It protects the student, but it also protects the teacher, because what if they accuse a teacher of being on Snapchat and sending something inappropriate and it's not really happening? Then the teacher has nothing that they can do to protect themselves. But I mean, it could, if you have taken pictures with your phone and then you put it on Snapchat, that picture is actually going to be on your phone, right?
Oh, that's true. No, that's true. You're right.
Yeah. So, my hope is that the school districts do their due diligence in creating policy that not only educates the staff members and the faculty members, but also educates students. I think it's important, that student education piece and parent education. I mean, you think about it, that every year you're supposed to go through the student handbook with your child, right? And you sign, and your child signs that says we've read and we understand the policies of the district. Well, if we're educating parents and students at the same time through the student handbook, then there's no question that everybody understands what the rules are.
Well, and I think that's fair. We even talked about that, Michael and I and Tracy actually have all talked about the fact that one of the things that we don't like about the Parental Bill of Rights, I mean, now we know it doesn't have any teeth and doesn't really do anything, but still in all, parents never knew what their rights were. Yeah. I mean, what were we going to do? Create an ad campaign as a nonprofit, and get that information out? That's, I think, some of the most frustrating part about this. I mean, bills like yours that could become a law that could actually, keep kids safe. Then how do we get the kids to know that? I mean,
yeah. I think that there's the possibility that the OSDE could create a rule based on the law, and that rule is educating students on what the boundaries are, and educating parents what the boundaries are, understanding the law. And I completely agree with you. One of the things that we are lacking is parents' knowledge of what their rights are, what the laws are, what the expectations and that sort of thing are. And I think that I think that's a good book for somebody to write.
That would never get read, except by the three parents.
Well, yeah. Well,
who actually look at the handbook.
Yeah. Did that go through pretty easy, Sherrie? Was there much opposition from people on that, or was it pretty common sense? Yeah, we need to do this.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it went through Education Committee, you know me, I do my homework. I was completely prepared to have some questions. And when it went through Education Committee, it went 11-0 with 0 questions.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Good for them.
Yeah. So then yesterday it was heard on the floor, and there were some questions, about 20 minutes worth of questions, and just 3, maybe 4 different people. Well, there are 3 Democrats, I think, and 2 different Republicans asked questions on it. But it passed 84-10. So even some of the Democrats voted for it.
No, that's good. Well, because it's a nonpartisan issue.
Mm-hmm.
Child safety is a nonpartisan issue. It
Absolutely.
just is.
Yep.
I mean, education should be a nonpartisan issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was very happy about that. It goes over to the Senate now. Adam Pugh, the education chair over there, is my author in the Senate. And so I'm anticipating that going through the education committee pretty quickly, and hopefully it'll get to the floor. And I'm going to request from the governor that we do a big press conference and signing of the bill. And, maybe getting that press conference out on the news will educate parents. And it has an emergency on it. Yeah. So as soon as he signs it, it's law. And the SDE can get started, with what their policy and training is going to be for teachers, and the districts can get started on what their policy is going to be. Get that pushed out.
I think that's a good thing. I mean, that's actually, before you got on, we were talking, Michael and I, about how many press releases I'm seeing come through my computer, because, I sign up for all of the communications, and it's just one tyrannical bill after another. The state is going to mandate this. The state is going to mandate this. We're going to make you do this. And I'm like, why are we passing all these bills that we're mandating people to do stuff that just is like I'll give you a really good example. It was Jessica Garvin's bill I think last year, where we were going to tax people to make sure that women had tampons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the schools. In schools, is that what
just
you're saying?
Anywhere.
Just in general? Yeah.
Just in general.
Yeah.
You need one. And it's funny because when I was in school, we had a school nurse. Mm-hmm. And if you ever had a problem, you just try. Can I please be excused and go to the school nurse's office? There was none of this. I don't even know how we've gotten to this place where we're passing a bill to tax me more so we can give away tampons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was on Jake Merrick's show yesterday morning, and he asked me about a bill that's currently going through. Maybe it's coming through the House. I think it's House bill, where it's mandating schools to put products in the girls' bathroom. And I said, you know what, Jake, this is already happening. I was a 5th grade teacher. This is when a lot of young girls come of age. Sorry to have to talk about this with you.
Michael, close your ears.
I remember those instances in class back in 5th and 6th
and so,
grade.
This is already happening. I don't understand why we have to mandate this, because schools already have this for people. Maybe it's not hanging on the wall in the girls' bathroom for free, but if you've got it for free in there, do you really think there's going to be anything in there available by the time girls go in there and need that? Because it gets stolen and put in purses and
flush down the toilet and
stopping up the toilets.
Get it wet and throw it on the ceiling.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see it as something that's necessary. Go to if you didn't bring something from home, go see the nurse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I'll share my screen with you so we can chat about something.
Okay. Are you springing something on me here?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. So here's what where is it going? Oh, is it where did it go? Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. Got it now. All right.
Oh, okay.
Shocking video shows teens leaking. This has gone, like viral, extra viral.
It's mega viral.
Mega viral. And
He is devouring them.
He is devouring them. Oh my. Okay. Well, I'm done with that. So thoughts?
Kink and fetish. That's where I'm at. Unacceptable.
Yeah.
Absolutely unacceptable. Yeah. And then they say, well, we've been doing it for years. I'm like, I wouldn't be advertising that. Honestly.
You know, it's kind of like they get caught stealing and then they learn, but we've been stealing for years. I mean, come on.
Yeah. It's like, what adult does not know? I mean, maybe there are some out there that don't realize that that is, sexual in nature. It blows my mind. It really just blows my mind. I just think, and the parents that say what they've been doing it for years, I'm thinking you need to be behind bars probably for.
Yeah.
Well, those are the
allowing
same
it.
parents. Those are the same parents who want the disgusting, near pornographic books in school too. And they're going to tell you, but I read it and I loved it as an adult.
Or I read it with my child.
Yeah.
We read it together.
Well, just as an example, Sherrie, my wife, she went to school here in Edmond. I was telling Jenny, they used to do that back when she was in school because they did it for years. Well, one of the participants, a male participant who participated in that, he wound up later becoming a teacher at EPS, and he wound up having sexual relationship with an eighth grade girl.
Yeah. So that's what it actually does. It blurs the lines and the boundaries between adults and students, and it puts kids in a position where now they have someone of authority. I'm going to kind of back up a little bit because it's the same argument that I started having about sex education in the classroom. It's like when you start talking about sex ed, and SECUS and all of these crazy groups are wanting to talk about this with our kindergartners and our preschoolers. Well, when you start talking about sex with children that young, they start thinking, oh, okay, it's okay to have that conversation with anybody, right? There's no longer boundary lines between private information and information or knowledge that is inappropriate for someone of that age. And then that opens a child up to trafficking, exploitation, all kinds of things that opens up for that child. And it makes them very vulnerable to sexual predators. And it's completely unacceptable.
Well, and it robs them of their innocence because
Yes,
then all of a
absolutely.
sudden, some little kid or even a middle schooler who isn't even really thinking that way is suddenly thinking that way. And it's not okay. I mean, there's all a developmental thing. Oh, and I do remember people saying for years, well, they get it on the internet. And I don't
That's on the
understand.
parents.
But that's my thought too. I'm like, well, why are you telling me you're a horrible parent? I mean, because that's basically what you're doing. You're just telling me you're a horrible parent because I don't know how to keep my kids safe from porn on the internet. I mean,
Yeah.
how many apps are there out there that do that? My goodness, you'd have to be a moron not to know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and let me just expand on what Sherrie said about the authority, aspect coming from school. I sent you recently, Jenny, I sent you that letter where Edmond Public Schools was having this family counseling session coming into the classrooms now at like primary school. So like my son's third grade class. Well, we opted out of that, even though they didn't say you could even opt out of it. We chose to opt out of that. And now, several weeks, or it's been a month or so since they started this program. Now my son's best friend literally comes home. My son's telling me every day that because he can't go to these classes, but when they come out, his really good friend now is constantly saying he's non-binary because he's being, not that they're necessarily just singling him out, but he sees that in a more authoritative state coming. No, it's not on the internet. This is at his school with the counselor talking about it in the classroom. So now he's got it in his head that he's a non-binary. I mean, my son comes home and tells me stories about him every single day, and it was never like this ever before until that counseling class started, a month or two ago.
Well, they plant that seed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and the American Counselors Association, which is the one that has so many counselors that are working in schools that are members of the American School Counselors Association. Those are the ones that have the horrible, you go to their website and all they talk about is DEI and SEL and, sex in the classroom. And you're like, and you're allowing these people to talk to impressionable children? What is wrong with us?
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but there's a lady that wrote a book on the transgender epidemic among girls. Her name is Abigail Schreier. She wrote Irreversible Damage.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, now she's got a new book out called Bad Therapy. Have you heard of that?
No.
Yeah. So it just came out just a week or so ago. I just got my copy a couple of days ago. And so, but she's got a couple of interviews out there with Jordan Peterson and I'm trying to think who else she was talking to. I watched the one with Jordan. And so you may go see if you can find that and watch that. And I already have the book. I'm going to start reading on it here pretty soon. But she talks about the dangers, actually, how dangerous it is now for children and adults, even adults getting into therapy situations because, and I found this very interesting, that when you have conversations about your feelings all the time, I mean, you think about this. This is what came to my head, and I posted this on Facebook. It's like, what is the difference between when somebody asks you, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
And what are you feeling?
Yeah.
So with the idea of SEL, that's what they're doing now. Yeah. Rather than talking to kids about what they're thinking, what's on their mind, they ask them about the emotions that they're having, the emotions that they're experiencing. And so if you talk to someone, especially an impressionable child, about their feelings all the time, what are you feeling? Everything is going to go back to, every decision that they make is going to go back to what they feel and not using their brain power to think about, should I do this? It's all now about how am I going to feel if I do this, or how am I feeling? And so I'm going to base my actions off of my feelings. And that is very dangerous. It takes away the ability for kids to reason, because they're no longer operating out of logic and reasoning, and now they're operating out of that what is it?
The amygdala or whatever it is.
Yes,
produces
the brain
all
stem.
of them.
They're operating out of brainstem rather than out of the brain.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, it makes me sad, because I remember when I was teaching, like in the early 2000s, late 1990s. I don't know if you remember this, Sherrie. There was a movement to make kids adults, right? Oh, well, kids have rights. Remember the kids' rights movements, right? And so this kid had rights, and well, you can't do that because that kid has rights. And I was very unhappy about that. I thought, well, I'm not going to say kids don't have rights, but they have a right to life. They have a right to not get beaten up, but they don't have a right to talk to adults like they're morons.
Right.
They don't have a right to do whatever they want to do. They don't have a right to just succumb to their feelings all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think it was that thing combined with the PC movement. I think it was that movement to kind of try to make these kids adults, and then with the PC movement, and that gave them the license. Basically, counselors and other things gave them the okay, well, you're the adult now, right? You're the one that has rights. And then they teach them that they have to feel about everything instead of think about everything. And now you have what we have now, which is a bunch of people who really can't control their emotions, and they have no idea how to separate reality from fantasy because
And they
they
can't make
can't think
decisions.
about anything.
Yeah, and they can't make decisions.
Yeah.
And so and I think that movement is where that age 13 movement for medical care, because like right now, if you have a child that is 12 or 13, you can take them to the doctor, and that child can kick the parent out of the examination room.
Yeah, I heard that.
And that doctor does not have to tell the parent anything except what the child wants that parent to know.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that was passed here in Oklahoma. I want to say 16, 17, 18. I'm not sure. It had just gotten into place whenever I came into the legislature.
Wow.
And what that does is it takes, this is going to sound like conspiracy theory, but we all know where they're going.
We'll put our tinfoil hat on.
Yep. And what it does is it allows for these people who want to remove the restrictions on pedophilia, to make it a sexual orientation to want to have sex with children. So if you lower that age of consent down below where it is at the age of 16 now, then that allows for those people who are attracted to children to be able to have sex and it be legal with children under the age of 16.
Well, see, we were in trouble because the first thing that popped in my head was MAPS.
Yeah.
Minor attracted persons.
Yep.
So when you start giving these people names, it's like name it and claim it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what this is. And as soon as you start doing that, then it gives it some kind of a
legitimacy.
Legitimate. Thank you. That's exactly what I was reaching for that I couldn't find. It gives it a legitimacy. And then now all of a sudden it's okay to have sex with children as an adult. And so I don't understand why people aren't seeing how, this is just getting bad.
Yeah. Well, I think what it is that if you have not done the research and you know what their end game is, then you have to want to know what their end game is, or believe that they have ulterior motives. If you if you don't believe that they have ulterior motives, then there's no reason for you to think about what their end game is, and so therefore there's no reason for you to think about what happens downstream when you put policies like that into place. Right. And so let's talk about the OP&A, right? The Oklahoma Prevention Needs
Assessment.
So this assessment, you know what? Let me back up a little bit. When Obama got into office, what did he do? One of the things that he did was he made it to where schools were violating students' rights if they were being disciplined for bad behavior.
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So let's remove the ability for schools to be able to discipline their students. So then what happens? Chaos in the classroom, right? At every age. So then the chaos in the classroom, then what do we need? Oh, we need an assessment to find out what's going on with these kids and where they're coming from. And then what happens? Then they say, oh, well, we've got so many kids that are experiencing trauma. We need community schools. And then what happens? Oh, we have community schools. Let's refer this kid to the mental health professional. And what do? They diagnose them with something, and then they end up on medication, right?
Yeah.
Then I'm going to take you down a little bit further downstream. Then at some point, the federal government starts making it a requirement that if you're going to get this money from us for these community schools, then you have to start attaching a student ID to this number. And then what happens? That student ID follows the kid. The kid has said, oh, well, I'm depressed. We have guns in our house. And then what happens when they turn 18? If they're tracking these kids now, then this kid turns 18 and wants to buy a rifle or join the military oh, well, you can't join the military. Oh, you can't buy a gun because you were depressed in the 10th grade and said that you were suicidal. And so once you start looking downstream and if you know what their end game is, you can look downstream and connect the dots. But if you don't believe that they have ulterior motives, there's going to be no dots there for you to connect. And so therefore you're going to say yes to whatever you think sounds like a good idea, because you're not forward thinking about what could happen down the line.
Well, years and years ago, I think it was 2016, we did an interim study on when Dan Fisher was still there. Dan had us do an interim study on data collection.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it's only gotten worse. It hasn't gotten any better.
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff that we did on data collection, went viral all over the nation because of the fact that people didn't understand that it's a pipeline. And it starts when that kid goes into school and those records become digitalized. And it just is, they call it the digital backpack.
Yep.
Like we're okay to be okay with that.
Yep.
And
schools are being bribed into doing it.
Oh, yeah.
Schools get millions of dollars from the federal government in order to put, some of these things into place. And the schools are like, oh, well, they're going to give us money if we'll do this. Well, they're not thinking about what the government's doing with that data. They're thinking, they're looking at the money. And so those of us that we keep saying it, follow the money.
Yeah.
What are they doing? What are they going to do with it?
We had Julianne Romanello on just recently to talk about workforce development. And it's the same thing with workforce development. They're literally training kids for jobs that they know, like they'll bring a business in, the state will bring in a business, then they'll give them all these tax credits. And then they'll all of a sudden now, workforce development, is going to teach the kid how to do aerospace jobs, because that's what we want here in Oklahoma is aerospace jobs or aerospace businesses. And it's crazy. And people don't put these two and two together and come up with it. I think it's what you said earlier. People don't want to think badly of people, and they sure don't want to think badly of their schools, because if they thought badly of their schools and they kept their kids in them, what would that make them?
That's right.
So they literally just go, monkeys, hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil.
They don't want to have to take responsibility for it. So it's easier just to ignore everything and, just go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, or call us names for saying what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're the crazy ones.
They don't want you to tell them. They don't want you to tell them what they. And unfortunately, we've got a situation where lawmakers across the United States, they kind of la. Don't tell me, because if you tell me, I'm going to have to fix that, or I'm going to have to acknowledge that it exists. And, they don't want to have to do the hard stuff. And because you know what, the hard stuff is hard.
Yeah.
But anything that is worth doing is not going to be easy. And so, it's kind of sad that we've got some that are just wanting to sail through and, just keep their seats, their big fat paycheck up there in DC. And I'm not going to say anything about the state.
Well, but it's true. That's the sad thing. And money trumps intellectualism, so they're like, oh, can I get this money? Well, they don't even think about what's going on later. They don't even think, it's just awful. And then how are you going to fix it? How many repeal bills did you see this session so far, Sherrie?
I don't think I've seen any. And I was thinking about that this morning.
Imagine that.
That's a shocker. No repeal bills?
I was thinking about that this morning. I thought, you know what? We had 550 bills come out of committees in the House, and I think there were five. I think it was 550. Don't hold me to that number. And I think there was around the same number, over 500 that's coming out of the Senate. And I thought, what in the world is wrong that we think that we need 1,000 bills, 1,000 new pieces of legislation. Now, I will give it that some of it is cleanup language.
Yeah.
But there's no way to go in and differentiate between cleanup language and actual new policy. And so, I just, it kind of made me sick once I thought about it. I thought 1,000 new pieces of legislation.
Well, and I still tell this story over and over again because it's a really good story. When I think it was probably 2016 or 17, something like that, maybe. And I was in then Representative Gary Band's office. And I was sitting down with Gary Bands. He was from Midwest City. He was a teacher, history teacher. And I was telling him, hey, Gary, we got to get this bill passed, the Common Core. We got to repeal this. We got to, put this back. We got to. And he's like, yeah, but Jenny, I mean, that's not what we do up here. People elect us to write bills.
Yeah, repeal.
To make legislation, to write law. And I'm like, no, Gary. People send you up there to protect their liberty. And sometimes that means repealing a bill or not writing a bill at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's something I was going to ask Sherrie anyway, is I wanted to know, just would you just get laughed out of the chamber or the House or any place if you just actually wanted to limit the size of state government rather than just say, check mark yes on every single piece of legislation that comes up there? I mean, does anyone even have that mentality to just, let's make things a little more condensed rather than just keep expanding?
Yes. And, it's on the Republican platform, limited government. It's on the Republican platform. And there are people that stand up and say, well, do you think that running this actually expands government? I mean, we're here to we're for limited government. Don't you think that this is expanding government? And, some of them will be like, well, no, I don't really think so. And I'm like, if it is another mandate or, telling somebody what they can and can't do, then yeah, that's what you're doing, is you're growing government.
Or creating a commission. I've seen two bills come across my, that have been like press releases about, hey, we just got this new commission. I'm like, what?
Yeah, we had a bill today that came across, and I don't remember which. I have to remember which commission it was, but it was changing it from a commission to a committee. And somebody asked me, why are they doing that? Why are they changing the language on this? What's the difference? What difference does it make whether it's a commission or a committee? Right. It was like, well, a commission is growing government. If it's a committee, then there's less regulation there. There's less that they can really do. They're getting together, having a conversation about this, but it really is, it really is pulling back the reins there by making it a committee and not a commission. Yeah. And so I was pretty impressed that they were doing that. Like I said, I don't remember which one it was. I don't remember.
Well, we have the last time I remembered looking. So this is, again, I'm like, you can't hold me to this, but I think the last thing I remember seeing was that Oklahoma had over 500 boards and commissions.
Oh,
really? Wow.
Wow. It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me.
How do you even think of 500 things?
Well, and that's where that swinging door of corruption comes from, because you have people that are supposed to be regulators, and then they wind up working for the companies in some type of sweetheart deal, in or out at some point in time. I mean, that's just how that whole system works.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does need to be streamlined. And, we had a bill in the Transportation Committee earlier, and what we did was we voted to take. Okay, let me back up just a little bit. So, in the trucking industry, the Oklahoma Corporation Commission and the DPS, Department of Public Safety, they have basically some similar responsibilities when it comes to trucks that come into the state, right?
Yeah,
They
that
have to
makes
stop
sense.
at the weigh stations
Mhm.
and get weighed and, move on. Well, DPS can, they do inspections for some things, and then the Corporation Commission does inspections for others. Well, one of the things that they did was they put a task force together for DPS, the Department of Transportation, the Corporation Commission, and I think there were a couple of other ones. I wasn't on this task force, but I think there was a different groups that were in the room that wanted to talk about why do we have two different agencies that are citing truckers and inspecting for two different things. And so what the decision that came forward was that they would take the responsibilities from the Corporation Commission and give that responsibility to DPS. Well, the Corporation Commission, I want to say they had like 100 inspectors, but DPS only had 30 or 50 or something. I don't remember the numbers. And so what taking it from the Corporation Commission did and giving it, or will do, and giving it to DPS, number one, it puts more inspectors out there because it made, I think if I remember correctly, I was thinking, okay, well, that puts 150 guys out there, inspecting trucks and weighing them and making sure that they're following Oklahoma law as far as weight requirements and that sort of thing. So we were taking money from the Corporation Commission because they made money off of the fines and fees for the citations that they write to truckers. So the Corporation Commission is completely against this, which I understand that. It's taking money from them. But you're also pulling those 100 inspectors out from underneath the Corporation Commission and putting them under DPS so that there's one agency doing the job instead of two. And so now you're condensing this and you're saying we're going to let DPS have responsibility for citations on the trucking industry. That makes complete sense to me.
Well, it does to me too.
Yeah, because what is that doing? That is, while it seems like you're growing one agency, maybe you are, but you are streamlining so that you're not actually paying for two different agencies to do the same job.
Right.
Let's let one agency do the one job, and that is regulating the trucking industry that's coming into the state of Oklahoma.
Right.
So, anyway, that's a really good example of one of the good policies that I've seen come through when it comes to that work. I actually am very concerned though, because we see what the big it's been a big mess actually taking the driver's license away, or the tags and stuff away from tax commission and putting it under Service Oklahoma, which actually did grow government, which I was not happy about that because it actually hurts our tag agents in the process. And so, that's been a big mess. And that was one of the things that I said, and that some of the other members on that committee have a problem with it because, we see what mess it's been made by moving all of these employees from under the tax commission and putting them into Service Oklahoma. And it's been a very painful process for them, for everybody, for taxpayers and for the tag agents as well. So I don't know.
Well, before we get too far afield,
yes,
you're working on a documentary.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think everybody should hear about your documentary. I don't even know really what the documentary is about. What is going on?
Yeah. So it all started back in November, whenever Ron Arthur's case out in Shawnee came through, and I started reading the court documents from his trial. And I started reading, this is where my 3958 came from. Have I already told this? Have I already said this?
No.
Okay. So when I started reading the court documents and realized that the access that he had to students was through digital communication. I think I mentioned it earlier. I said Grinder, remember?
Yeah.
And it also, if you read the court
You
documents,
just had to say that again.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But anyway, so through this app and then also through text messaging, through cell phones. And so I started thinking about that. I thought, how can we stop this? And so that's where my legislation came from.
Interesting.
And then I saw, my husband and I, we don't really watch TV. We watch documentaries. And so I had a young woman reach out to me, wanted to tell me her story. And it's a young woman who was raped by her softball coach. Did I tell this story?
No, but we've had
We talked about it, I think, with
we
Visit
did.
Nanny,
We had
right?
a show
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so she came to me and wanted to tell me her story. And so I started thinking about that. And then of course, I don't know if we've discussed Casey Yoakum's case and what has happened to him, out in Wetumpka. Noble, it actually started in Noble, and now the coach was working in Wetumpka. And so I started thinking about, what, these people who are not able to get their story told in the court system, they need their stories told out in the public arena.
Yeah.
And, I think I said earlier that we've had, 12 to 14 cases that have come through in the last year where teachers have crossed the lines, or I'm sorry, not teachers, but school employees have crossed the line with their relationships with kids. And I just thought, what, we need to tell that story, because if it's happening in Oklahoma and we've had at least 14 cases in the last year, it's happening everywhere. And what about those cases that people are not reporting, and those stories that are not getting told? And so I thought, I want to do a documentary on this. I want to tell these stories. And so that's what we're doing. I am in the process now. I need a film crew. So I've got some that I'm going to start interviewing here in the next couple of weeks, trying to figure out what my budget is. And I had a conversation with some people earlier today about doing some crowdfunding and trying to see if I can get people to invest in this. And I think that it will end up being maybe a 4-part series because it's just such heavy information that I think 20 to 30 minutes at a time is really about all people will want to hear about. And so I think we're going to chunk it. And we're going to talk about this bill. I've reached out to somebody and told them that you get me in front of audiences, and I will fly anywhere in the United States and talk to any legislature or any lobby group or anybody to try to get our communication bill passed in all 50 states, and then start talking about something called Pass the Trash. Have you guys talked about that?
No.
So a lady in 2020 wrote a book, and she called it Passing the Trash. And what happens is, and this didn't happen in Shawnee, but it has happened in other districts, where somebody reports to administration that there is some inappropriate conduct, and that they confront the employee about it, and the employee is allowed to resign.
Yeah.
Where then they move on to, there's no record of any of this misconduct, not with the law enforcement and not with the State Department. And they're allowed to go to another school and then perpetrate on other students at another school. And and that term is called passing the trash. Ugh. And so I think that there's a story there to tell about the communication piece. I think there's a story there to tell about passing the trash. I think there's legislation that needs to be done in both instances, and we've got to start talking about policy, rules, legislation that needs to be put in place that empowers school boards and leadership in schools to have the freedom to be able to just fire somebody. You get caught doing this, you're fired. And maybe empower kids and parents to tell their stories, so that, maybe some of these that are too old to have their stories taken care of, their cases taken care of in court of law, but maybe other kids will come forward and say, yes, this happened to me. And maybe it'll be within the statute of limitations.
Yeah, I think role models in this particular case are so helpful because, man, when you're that age, you don't know what's going on. And it's such a mind mess
Yeah.
that,
Well,
you've got somebody that you've been taught to look up to, you've been taught to respect, you've been taught to basically do what they say, and then they
trust.
do stuff. Yeah. And then they do stuff to you, and you're like, well, so now what do I do?
Yeah. It's broken
It,
trust. And,
it's awful.
I tell the story, that just imagine that you have a basketball player or softball player, football player, whatever sport they choose, and they're a good player, and you've got a coach who has bad intentions with these students, and all of a sudden they are, there's some grooming that goes through. We can talk about that in just a minute, but they start telling them, doing things for them, and then allowing them to, there's boundaries crossed, and then the student all of a sudden is told, well, if you'll do this, then I'll make sure you get playing time, and I'll make sure that the NCAA recruiters know who you are, and the colleges come to watch you play, and I'll help you get a scholarship to your college of choice. And it becomes a barter system.
Yeah,
And
no.
and what is so sad about that to me is that we have parents that unknowingly they put that pressure on their kids to excel both in the classroom and on the field, whatever field that is that they choose. And then all of a sudden that puts them in a very vulnerable position to be manipulated by people who are in power and who can control their destiny.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, by the way, before I forget about it, we have somebody that you need to talk to, and I will text you that person's uh, number so that you can talk right directly to them. But Kevin Batts, our friend Kevin Batts, does documentaries,
Oh.
and he would be a perfect person to call,
Okay.
for sure. And he might even be able to help you crowdfund.
That would be
So
awesome. That would be
we'll
amazing.
we'll hook you up with him because
Okay.
he'll be great.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So in the scheme of things, this documentary you talked about, breaking it down into smaller pieces. What are you thinking about your venue is going to be?
Well, I don't really know, because we've got I've got several people who have been victims of this crime
Yeah.
that I want to talk to and interview, so that they can tell their stories. And so I don't really know what that looks like. Right now I'm just in the planning process, trying to figure out, who's actually gonna do the filming and the editing for me, and figure out what kind of funding I'm gonna need for that.
Right.
And then I've had a conversation with some people about an actual script, or kind of figuring out what an outline is of what it's going to look like, the breakdown, and so there's a lot to the planning process, and I've never done it before, so I am learning while I'm working on it, and so I feel like it's definitely a worthwhile process. I don't want it to be something that behind a paywall. I want it to be accessible to everyone. And
Yeah.
so I've reached out to some people to help me figure out how to monetize it, figure out how to, to make some money off of it, not so that I can profit, but so that we can keep telling stories.
Right. So you can pay for it for sure.
Yep.
Well, I actually think that's a fairly needed thing, as much as I hate that idea.
Mm-hmm. I know. I hate that it's needed. Just like my bill 3958.
Yeah.
I hate that it's needed. I hate that we need a law saying that schools can't put pornography in classrooms or in libraries. But I think that what it's going to take is a groundswell of parents and voters to understand what their kids are facing, and what they're being subjected to. I just think so many of them, they don't believe it, and they don't want to believe it, because I had somebody tell me before, well, if they're sending them to a school that's doing this to them, and I think, Michael, I think you said it, how does that make them feel? They don't want to admit it, because they're at fault, right? And that's hard to swallow.
Yeah. Well, 100%. Sherrie, I would knock on a door when I was doing the school board campaign. I'd knock on a door. I'd show someone the actual book that my daughter was made to read in the class, with the language, a couple quotes, and they couldn't even accept it. They'd say that's not happening here. And they'd literally go online and say, I'm making stuff up. But that's just the disconnection. But I just want to say, I think your documentary is, it's unfortunate that it happens, but there's no better medium, I think, in this time than kind of that short form series documentary, because that's what people respond to. I mean, they can easily watch it, they can easily share it, and they can, and I just can't commend you enough for doing that, because, that's what it's going to take. It's going to take someone like you to do something like that to actually affect the change that, is needed.
Yeah, I agree. And I may have said this earlier. I was having a conversation with somebody today, and they said, well, what are you thinking about a length? And I said, well, I don't really know, long enough to tell the story. And this person said, well, one of the things that you need to think about is how much somebody can endure. And I think we did talk about this, and I'm like, you know what? I hadn't even thought about that. Hadn't even thought about it, because, I can sit down and watch 30, 45 minutes of something that's that heavy. I mean, I'm in the process of that book, Lost in Translation. Are you familiar with that?
No.
It's a psychologist. She was actually one of the psychologists that was on the What is a Woman video.
Oh, the Epic Times thing.
No, Matt Walsh.
Oh, Matt Walsh.
It's one of the doctors. She wrote a book called Lost in Translation, and I can only listen to excerpts of it for short periods of time before I have to move on to something else. And so it's taking me quite a while to get through it, because the content is so heavy. We sat down, my husband and I sat down to watch the documentary. I think it's on Netflix, about what happened with the Boy Scouts back in the 80s. And I think we watched about 30, 40 minutes of it, and we had to turn it off. We couldn't watch any more of it. I never went back to it because it was so disturbing. And so
really,
yeah. So that's why I think it's going to take, telling the stories in chunking it, so that it can be, digested a little bit easier.
Well, I want to ask you a question, because I'm just curious. So we know that Edmond Public Schools is now trying to take their case to keep Glass Castle and Kite Runner in their curriculum, even though they've been, Michael and I did a whole show on this last week. And we managed to get like an hour and 30 minutes out of it, because it's just the worst story. You literally have parents who've been complaining about these books since 2016 minimally, and I'm sure before, when they put them in. And it was funny, but I posted some of the pieces out of that on my LinkedIn page, and I have a guy who made a comment, and he said, isn't that weird, because I actually graduated from Edmond Memorial in the 80s, and we read Hamlet and Charles Dickens, and he was just listing off these phenomenal books. And then he makes this kind of wry comment about, but gosh, our proficiency levels were much higher back then. And people don't understand how just dreadful these books are. It's not just what you're reading. It's not just a subject matter. Their Lexile scores, which is a score for reading, are usually 5th and 6th grade.
Yeah.
How are these kids going to develop a better vocabulary than a 6th grader if you're not giving them better, grammar and vocabulary to read than a 6th grader?
Yeah. Well, when it comes to the
It's
kite runner, that the rape scene in there is bad, and I didn't realize it, but my oldest son read The Kite Runner in high school. I didn't know
oh
it. He graduated in
no.
2011 and never told me about it. I had no idea what the book was. No clue about it. But then I started doing, 2 years ago, whenever I first started running the legislation and talking about this in the state of Oklahoma, I started doing my research on the kite runner because it's on the AP English list. And one of the things that I found was that somebody had done a review of it, and they said even barring the scene in there that is just so violent in nature, it is not a well written book.
Yeah.
It is not literature that is quality literature. And so why are we having kids read something? Now, if you want to highlight authors who are diverse in ethnicity and background, then I think there's probably some other books that are better written out there than what this is.
Dostoevsky would be good.
Yeah. So one of the things that I did was I reached out to the AP board and, said, what are your thoughts about this? Here's my argument for removing that off of the AP board list. And they said, well, the schools don't have to read that. And I said, but that's not what they're being told. The teachers are being told that it's on the list, and so they have to include it in their classroom. And so at this point, they're kind of being misleading in what they're saying. It's like, well, you don't have to read it. You don't have to choose it. They can choose whatever they want to. But then at the same time, teachers are saying, no, they're telling us that we have to read this with our kids. So,
and I think it was a little bit, I think you made my point too, or one of the points that I've talked about before. You didn't even know your son read that.
Mm-mm.
And, kids come home from school and you go, hey, how's it going? Oh, great. What'd you do today? Oh, nothing much. How you doing? Oh, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
What do you learn about your kid from that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we got to get back to the dinner table.
Oh, that's an absolute fact. When my kids were little, they knew that that's what we did every single night.
Yeah. And phones down. Phones absolutely down.
Oh, yeah.
No phone zone.
Oh, so that's a good question to ask you. What do you think about the bill that's out? I don't know if it's gotten a hearing or not about no phones in the classroom.
I'm not on education committee anymore. So
okay.
Yeah. So if it's out there, it's not one that I've read yet. Talking about my son reading it.
Yeah, we were talking. So when kids don't tell parents what's going on, I mean, you're kind of stuck. I mean,
yeah.
As a matter of fact, the article that I wrote for the Federalist in 2016, which had one of the moms who had complained about Kite Runner and Glass Castle, she basically didn't know anything about it at all. Her daughter had read it, and it was her son that came to her and said, Mom, I can't read this book. Mm-hmm. And she went to her daughter and said, did you read this? And she goes, yeah, but I mean, whatever. And Mom was horrified, but the boy was like, yeah, I just can't even read it. Yeah. And then basically she said, okay, well then you don't have to read it. She went to the teacher. She worked it out that he would just go to the library. And then all the kids made fun of him because he was in the library by himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kids are cruel.
Yeah, so they just shouldn't be doing it, and then nobody has to worry about that. And if schools are so high on we don't want bullying, then they surely don't want that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think one of the things that we had transitioned to was getting back to the dinner table.
And that's true. I mean, as so long as you if you talk to your kids, and that's what I did for years. I mean, to the point where my kids got a little irritable about it because we we had a book. I'll have to share it with you sometime. It was a George Washington's book of ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And
I have that.
do you have that? When
I do.
was that written?
I don't know. I bought it as a little thin, I've got it as a little thin book, I think, that I bought in DC or in Philadelphia. Yeah.
And we actually went through that book, and
That's
it was
good.
weird, because it was based on George Washington's time, but it was very interesting. And it's hard to get kids to do that. I don't want to do that, Mom. I want to watch Dancing with the Stars. I mean, but you're the adult, and that's what my husband and I said was, well, when you get to be the adult, you don't have to make your kids do that if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
But we're making you do it.
Yep.
So,
oh, and I think the other thing that I had said was you need to make the time at the table and no phone zone. There needs to be places. One of the things that I have encouraged parents to do is to make the car and the dinner table or breakfast table no phone zones. You're not, put the phones away and talk to your kids when you've got them captured, right?
oh yeah.
Because other times you're not going to have a place where you can capture them and have conversation with them.
One other thing that I thought about when we were talking about the books, you heard that Senator Pugh actually took a bill and gutted it and put in language that basically was going to take the accreditation process away from the State Department of Education and turn it over to the commission on, do you remember what it's called? The Commission on Educational Quality, something in educational quality.
Yeah. It's the Oklahoma Education Quality OEQA.
Something.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I never can remember what the A stands for.
So I'm just curious, do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I think when you do that, you make the Department of Education, it's null and void. They have no job at that point. So at that point, the Secretary of Education, who is appointed by the governor, actually has the control over curriculum and standards and that sort of thing. And so, I mean, if we want to be a state where our superintendent of public instruction is appointed by the governor instead of being elected by the people, then I mean, that's what you're going to do. But it will render the State Department of Education worthless at that point.
Seemed like it to me.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yep.
I mean, and the only thing I could think about was, well, this is Edmond, and there's an Edmond school who doesn't like the policy. Go figure that.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Lots of districts have jumped on board, and said, well, we support Edmond in this. And so,
let's spend those tax dollars against us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. That if people in the school districts are upset about that, they need to go to their board members and tell their board members, why are you spending our kids' classroom money on suing Ryan Walters over a policy that removes pornography from the school libraries?
Yeah.
They need to stand up and speak. But, there again, okay, let's go back to the sports. They're afraid that their kids will be taken off of the sports team and benched or, end up in a classroom that they don't want to be in, or, who knows what.
Well,
bullied, basically.
And we all know that happens. I mean, so, I get it, but then maybe at that point it's time to homeschool. I mean, homeschooling has pretty good sports.
Yeah. Well, I had somebody reach out to me yesterday and tell me a story about something that happened. I'm not going to go into the details. And basically what they did was they told the mother that if the mother didn't have a mental evaluation on her child, third grader, that he could not come back to school until they had a mental evaluation on him.
Wow.
So now they're depriving this boy of his basic rights for education because he was talking about the guns that the family has. I guess I'll go ahead and tell the story. So I guess he and another kid were talking about guns that they have in the house. And, you know, I don't know what the context of him talking about it was. Now, if he was talking about, you know, bringing it to school and, you know, hurting somebody, then I can see that. But just talking about, you know, I get to go out and shoot my BB gun, you know, or dad's taught me how taking me hunting. I mean, I have so many friends that the dads and even the moms go hunting and take their kids hunting. And if he's just talking about his shotgun or, you know, whatever, that's the First Amendment issue for me. So,
but you know what that reminds me of? Do you remember under Obama and when we were talking about, you know, the whole Obamacare thing? Do you remember one of the things that people were very concerned about was, and this actually happened to us. I totally forgot about that until I started to say that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I remember that happened to us. So my third oldest daughter got appendicitis on New Year's evening. I mean, New Year's Eve. And we took her to the hospital and she was in, and she had to go for an emergency appendectomy. And we were all up in the room with her before they took her into surgery. And the nurse was asking her questions like, are you comfortable around your parents? Is there anything in your house that doesn't make you comfortable? Mm-hmm. Are there guns that you have access to? And my husband he was starting to get like purple. He was getting so mad. But that was right around that time, you know, that was what, you know, Obamacare, that was one of the things they were supposed to do was to find out who, I think it was basically to find out who had guns in their house. And, you know, Betty was just looking at us going, I don't want to answer these questions. And so we just said, don't answer them. Just say, I don't know, not answering.
Yeah. And what's unfortunate is that some of these things, some of these policies, you understand why they want to ask those questions because you've got women who are in abusive relationships, and the only way that they're sometimes will talk about it is if they're able to talk about it with a doctor. But then at that point, when does your private medical information and the conversations that you have with your doctor then become the government's business?
Yeah.
Right.
And when you're taking money from the federal government for certain programs that allow them to ask these questions, then that's when it's used for bad. Yeah. And so it all goes back to what we were talking about from the very beginning, and that looking downstream to see what the final intention is of the people who are trying to put that policy into place.
Well, and downsizing government, like you said, right-sizing government and making, you know, actually following the Republican platform of trying to make things smaller instead of growing it.
Yep.
So anything else exciting that you've got coming up for next week?
Well, it's deadline week this week and next week. And then of course we go, we're finishing up. So for those of you that are not 100% up on the business of the legislature and the way it runs. So the first 3 or 4 weeks, we do committee work. And that means that any bills that are written by House members are heard in House committees. The Senate does the same thing. Senators write bills and they get theirs heard in Senate committees the first 3 weeks of session. And then we have something that we call floor work. And that's when everything that was heard in the committees comes out and it gets heard by the full body. which is 101. And we have about 3 weeks that we work on that. Then at spring break, usually deadline week is either that Monday or Tuesday before that, or the Thursday before. So this year it's the Thursday before, next Thursday, a week from today, March 14th. So we have to have every bill that is going to get heard in the House that was written by a House member that hopefully went through committee, has to be heard on the House floor. So then we do the swap. Our House bills go over to the Senate to be heard in committee and then on the floor. And then Senate bills come over to the House for us to hear in committee and then come to the floor. And then hopefully at that point, unless it's got some kind of amendment to it, then it goes straight to the governor's desk from there. It goes through both chambers and then goes to the governor.
Right.
So we're in deadline.
We're almost halfway done.
Yeah. Crazy enough. Yes. We're almost halfway done.
Well, but I mean, as many bills as you said got hearing this year, it's probably a good thing that we have a short session.
Yeah, I think today was deadline to get your Senate author. So in the House, you have to have a Senate author before your bill can be heard on the floor.
Right.
And so I think Floor Leader Eccles today said that if you've got 10 minutes, this is the announcement, you've got about 10 minutes to round you up a Senate author if you don't already have one. And he said, and if you don't, that's fine with me, because that removes about 60 bills from the agenda. So who knows how many people were able to scramble and get a Senate author by that deadline. But it gets grueling. This time of year, we end up starting at 9:30 in the morning and end up going until 4, 5, 6 o'clock at night. There have been a couple of years when we were there till almost midnight. You can't,
yes.
According to, and this is funny, this is something that most people don't know, but you cannot run a bill past midnight. And so most people have no idea about that rule. And one of the funny things is that, of course, before computers and time clocks and things, they would just throw something up, a towel or something up over the clock, so you couldn't see what time it is, to know that you were there past midnight passing a bill past a time that you weren't supposed to pass it. But now, because everything is computer automated, then you can't run anything past midnight. So we have been there till 11:30 sometimes in the last 5 years of my tenure. So hoping that we don't have to do that this year.
Well, yeah, me too, actually. Well, Sherrie, thank you for being with us. Really, really appreciate it. Looking forward to next month, when I'm hoping you'll have more information about the documentary.
Yeah.
I'll give you an update.
Some more stuff to talk about. So we'll look forward to that very much. And thank you again for being with us today. And we're very excited about the bill. So if you need help, let us know, and we'll put that up on the podcast, or, get it out in a newsletter, so that we can make sure that we, if you need some help getting it passed, we're happy to help there.
Yeah. I just, at this point, just hoping and praying that it gets through the Education Committee successfully, and then gets actually heard on the Senate floor. That will probably be when I could use some help, is encouraging McCourtney and Floor Leader McCourtney to hear it on the floor and get it to the governor's desk just as soon as possible. So,
well, we can do that.
Okay.
We can ask people to make phone calls and send emails, and we will be happy to do that. And Michael, it was good to see you today.
Yes, ma'am.
And
it's always good to be here.
We will see everybody next Wednesday, and I'm in a different room right now, so I don't have my calendar of who will be on next Wednesday. But it will be in the newsletter. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, make sure that you go to rope2.org, and a box will pop up, and you can sign up for our newsletter. And we get one out every Monday, and try to make sure that you have information that's going to help you through the week. So, and the recaps of all of our videos. So make sure you do that. And thanks for being with us today. And you have a great weekend.
Hey, y'all too.
And we will talk to everybody next week. So thanks.
See y'all.